You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCF&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I'm your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I'm your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today on the podcast, we are going to delve into the lives of the rich and famous. As my good friend Robin Leach used to say, champagne wishes and caviar dreams. From Marshallberg Farm, way out there on the coast, near kind of 12 miles from Beaufort and Morehead City. We'll get more exact on that. From the owners and operators of it, specifically the facilities manager, Mr. Brian Rayburn.
Hello.
Welcome. And his lovely wife, Leanne Wan Rayburn, who's Director of Sales and Marketing.
Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to Raleigh.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, so this was completely unexpected in the fact that you all make or farm caviar, and we're not in Russia. We're doing this in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Blew me away. A mutual friend of ours had brought this up to me at a luncheon and said, "I got to introduce you to these people. They're making fantastic caviar out there. Russian, sturgeon, caviar. Then there's all these different grades. Blah blah blah. Of course, we got to get into this. We got to get into it. But this might be the most unique story we've had on the show." Matt loves when I qualify the word unique. You don't need to qualify unique.
Most unique.
Unique is unique, yes.
Yeah.
But yes, welcome. Thank you for coming all the way out from the Outer Banks to here to downtown Raleigh for this for the show. But tell us what the heck you guys do.
Why caviar?
Why caviar? Caviar is a good way to bring fish farming into the popular culture, into the narrative of returning back to farming protein sources here in the United States. Caviar comes from sturgeons, and we can farm them in a way that is sustainable, it's completely controllable, it's something that we can depend upon, be a reliable source of protein.
Yeah.
Both in the meat of the fish and in the caviar, which is a more luxury item. So it is a way that we can kind of roll back the tide on some of the things that have happened to farming and agriculture and harvest of fish in this country over the past couple centuries.
And why is it that when we think of caviar, we think of Russia? Are sturgeon native to those waters?
Yes.
Okay.
Sturgeon are native to places all around the world. Pretty much you can find indigenous sturgeon populations anywhere north of the equator. There are none south of the equator.
Okay.
But you can find them from China to Russia. There's native species here in the United States, the Atlantic sturgeon on the coastal areas. There's an Alabama sturgeon. There's a white sturgeon out in California. There's a green sturgeon in Oregon and Washington. There's 27 different species of sturgeon found around the world. Caviar traditionally is thought to be more from Russia as a delicacy that was indigenous to that area, but it's found in the historical record going back to the ancient Greeks. They ate sturgeon. It was a common dish. They used the parts of sturgeon, like the swim bladder, to make carrying vessels for various precious liquids. It has been a thing with human populations for as long as there have been people fishing.
So did Russia just have the best species of sturgeon to do it? Is that the thing? And the most ideal water temperatures kind of thing?
Well, traditionally, out of those 27 species, the 3 species that the best caviars come from fish that are native to the Caspian Sea.
Okay.
And there's a town called Astrakhan, which is in southern Russia, which is along the Volga River and the Caspian Sea. And the sturgeon in the Caspian Sea will spawn up the Volga River. So that was kind of a central place. And that was also part of the trading route.
Okay.
So
There was a big Baltic trade going from the Great Britain area back and forth with Russia, and caviar had to be salted to be transported.
Right.
Okay.
So these fish eggs had to be salted, and as a result, it developed into salted fish eggs became what caviar is. But you could eat it right out of the fish if you wanted to. But for transportation in times before refrigerated storage, to transport something in a wooden cask, 3 months away, you got to salt it
You
down.
got to preserve it.
And
yeah.
we're talking about a lot of caviar back then, because before they were overfished, if it was the 1700s, 1800s, there were beluga that were found that would contain up to 900 pounds of caviar.
Wow.
So they would take the caviar out, and it would be like the size of a cow. Whereas now in farming, we're dealing with like a couple kilos at a time.
So what you guys farm is Osetra.
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
Russian sturgeon, which is Asapenser gildenstadi, is the species name.
What did you call me?
It actually means golden in Persian, so it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
So it's not just Russia. She said Persian. So
Yeah.
Right. In the Persian language,
Iran,
gildenstadi means Persian. So,
yeah.
right, because the Caspian Sea sort of encompasses a lot of
Yeah.
countries. Yeah.
And then you go over that mountain range, and you're in the Middle East, essentially. I forget what that mountain range is, but
I have a map.
this is why you have that Russian-Afghan war, etc.
Sure.
But okay, so yeah, there's a long history of caviar. Okay, so how is it that you guys, back to your evolution and story, how is it that you decided on the specific species of your sturgeon to make the caviar from, and how is it that you got out to Marshallberg Farm?
Well, I'll let Leanne talk about the family story, about how we started the farming, and then I can talk about why specifically Asapenser guldenstadi, the Russian sturgeon.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to learn how to say that before the end of the class. Asapenser goldenstadi.
Yes.
Caucasus Mountains.
Caucasus
That's where
Mountains.
Caucasian probably comes from. But the
I could use a
Caucasus
Caucasian.
Mountains. Yeah, that's interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
Russian. All right.
I'm so out of my comfort zone because I know nothing about any of this, but I
Caviar.
find it to be so
Well,
fascinating.
maybe if you
Yeah,
eat
let's
it,
taste.
you'll have.
So
a better...
you brought some caviar
Yes.
in.
And sturgeon meat.
and sturgeon.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so this is.
What
so
should we taste first?
The only thing I know about like beluga is Baby Beluga and Rafi singing that song, but
Well, that's
beluga
a whale,
is
though,
a whale,
right?
right?
Yeah. Right.
So
So
that's
it's a
a
beluga.
mammal, and so that's weird too, right? Beluga caviar is that's
It's
not.
a totally different animal.
It comes from the husso.
Yeah, the beluga sturgeon is actually species name husso or husso.
Oh, so beluga
What you
is
call
a
me?
So
type
it has
of
nothing to do with the whale.
beluga
Right,
is
nothing
a type
to
of
do with the whale.
sturgeon, and then also there's a beluga whale.
Right.
Correct.
Super confusing.
I can't think of any other animal that's like that, where they have the same name, but
But
yeah.
different
but-
things.
But yeah, similar but very different.
Right.
Okay, so we're farming beluga or osetra, and then I'm sorry, you said there was another name.
Sterlet is the
Sterlet.
third one that's on the hierarchy.
Okay.
But beluga are pretty much it takes so long for them to reach the age to produce roe that there's not a good farming animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should get into
That's
the species
a whole nother
selection
topic, though.
as well, because that will tie in very well.
yeah.
Okay,
it.
so but what we have here is Osetra. I have the ultimate caviar tin
like
opener
a
here.
little mini flathead screwdriver.
Yeah.
I like it.
Flathead screwdriver, but that's what you need. It looks like a little
That's
hockey
exactly
puck, if you will.
Yeah,
And
and this is the reason that the species name gildenstadi is because this caviar has this golden shade, and that means gold in Persian. And you can try it on a piece of sturgeon meat, actually,
ooh,
and
that
then
sounds crazy decadent, but let's do it. I feel like James Bond right now.
yeah, and then a little vodka at the
Yeah,
end.
we have vodka that we're drinking.
I would actually like to try that one. It was harvested very recently.
Please. I don't have cooties. Whoa.
Oh no.
Oh, Matt. You just dropped like $4,000 on the floor. The maid's going to be eating tonight. So
Can't have clumsy fingers to have caviar.
so the sturgeon meat in itself is delicious. It has like almost like a,
Chicken?
It's not fishy.
no, it's more like it's meaty. It's
Smoky and
Smoky
meaty. And
meat.
This is smoked sturgeon.
yeah.
Okay.
This is how we
unbelievable.
manufacture and sell it.
try the caviar?
Yeah, I do.
But of course, the caviar is is salted, as you said, and it's got a brininess to it, but and you've done this before. Brian just put caviar on the back of his thumb knuckle and just went straight in.
That's Russian style.
Is that Russian
Right.
style?
Yeah, just put it on the back of your thumb right there, and boom.
That's a lot smarter than how I did it.
Yeah.
Well, off the floor.
Yeah. And then following it with a little vodka. Yeah,
That's really delicious, I have to say.
Yeah, here.
You know, the thing is, I know it's a delicacy and people do it a lot, and especially in New York, people go to like caviar bars and they have all these different types of vodka to drink with it and stuff like that. But the only time that I drink or that I eat fish roe or fish eggs is usually with sushi, right? It'll be on a roll or something like that. But this is so different. I mean, but it makes so much sense that it's a sustainable product that comes naturally, and it's like, why not have this as one of our protein sources? So there you go.
Yeah, speak to us about that. What is like the nutritional value, or what are we getting inside a caviar when we're eating?
It's super high in long chain omega-3s. So if you ever hear about fish oils,
Yeah.
omega-3s, it's very rich in those, high in protein, aphrodisiac.
Yeah, I was feeling
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a healthy food. And as far as it being more expensive, I mean, yes, it's caviar. So, it's not for everybody, but I would say
it's delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand why it's expensive and why it's a luxury product. Obviously, for one, because it's not easy to produce.
Right.
And let's get into that in a sec. So now, Leanne, your father started Marshallberg Farm. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How does one just say, I'm just going to get into caviar and just start doing this?
Well, it wasn't so much caviar. It was more about the concern that America imports 90% of the seafood that we consume, and yet from all of that, 90%, it would not pass U.S. regulations for environmental health or safety or...
You mean the farms that we're importing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, we have a lot to say about, wanting to be sustainable and wanting to be good for the environment and all these things, but yet 90% of the seafood we consume is from sources that would not pass our own standards.
And you're talking about just all seafood in general.
All seafood.
Yeah.
Caviar.
From shrimp to pangasius, or catfish.
Yeah.
It's just that's the way that global trade has made our country to a net importer of seafood. Despite the rich coastal resources, which I'm sure you guys have heard about, shrimping and floundering.
Of course.
There's a big booming oyster industry coming to North Carolina, and has been going on in Virginia for a while. Blue crabs. I mean, despite the rich abundance of resources that are still there, which we need to husband to meet demand, 90% of all seafood in the United States that's consumed is imported.
Well, I guess that's because only 2% of the population is
Right.
Employed by farming.
Engaged in farming.
See how informed I am that I knew
Bring
that?
it all together. It all relates.
I think that was something we discussed before we started recording.
Yeah, Brian filled me in on that.
We were
which
talking
is
about only 2%
just
of the
astounding.
2% of all Americans are actual farmers. Is that right?
Engaged in agriculture as their commercial
Yeah, as a source
business.
source of income.
Source of income.
So, and then Leanne, did your father have sturgeon? Was he a fan of caviar, or it was merely an altruistic endeavor?
Purely like a scientific endeavor, wanting to like create a way for aquaculture in this country to be profitable.
Yeah.
And can it be done? Basically, was the question. So it was more of a challenge than a
Okay.
A lot of traditional, if I can say that word because it only applies to the 20th century, but fish farming practices and farms in the United States, for example, doing catfish or trout or hybrid striped bass, typically their margin per fish is like $1. So for every fish they sell, the farmer only nets $1.
Okay.
If that,
Wow.
So you have to
get into
do
fish
a high volume business,
right? To get into fish farming, you have to do a really high volume type of business. Sell millions of fish to be able to justify hiring good skilled labor and have the facilities that are capable of doing this. Not to mention the land, for heaven's sakes. So to get into fish farming, it can be quite expensive. So when we talk about what kind of species that we're going to select to do fish farming, particularly in the style of fish farming that we do, which is a recirculating aquaculture system. We had to choose something that was economically viable, something that where each fish has higher than that $1.
Right.
$1
Because you have a
margin.
byproduct of the fish with the caviar. So it's not only the fish that you're selling, but
Right. Well, our byproduct is actually the meat. Caviar is our main,
the primary.
our
Yeah.
primary thing, and as a byproduct, I mean, we can go into lots of different byproducts that we try to derive from sturgeon, of which there are many. But the be all and the end all to make aquaculture and fish farming a sustainable thing, it has to be financially viable, and so species selection, particularly with this type of caviar, that makes it possible.
okay.
I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars of infrastructure being invested just to get to the first dollar gained back. So,
And these fish, this particular species, you have to wait about 8 years
8 years
until
before you're able to harvest.
they're able
Yeah,
to
I want
produce
to know
roe.
about that farming process and technique. But first, Matt, I want to ask you, if you were forced to pair caviar with wine,
Yes.
what wine would you choose?
I'm glad you asked that question because vodka is the traditional, but also champagne. And I know it's the
Yeah.
easy answer because I have to be honest with you. I don't know, and we should just experiment and try a different vodka. But this particular vodka, while it being good, it brought out the fishiness that wasn't there when I ate the
interesting.
fish. It brought out more of a like a
I
briny.
actually-
I'll go get some more vodka.
Yeah, let's try a
Thanks,
different
Max.
one. I like.
Who would say no to that?
I also like really light, cold sake with it.
Oh yeah, that. Yeah, sake would be a
I just brought this because we happen to have it. At
no,
the,
and it
at
was,
the,
and I think this vodka for other applications would be good. So this is a local distillery to you that
Yes.
Max and I are not familiar with it. What's
Bogue Distillery. Yeah.
Okay, oh, yeah.
which is down 24 from us, kind of near Jacksonville, I would say.
Okay,
That neck of the woods.
nice.
And now we're going to pour some Social House coming out of Kinston.
Man, that is a full glass.
And
It is Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I stop at 7 ounces. That's it.
Listeners can't see.
You know what? Why we are going to eat and drink this lovely combination? I'm going to tell you guys about maybe a good place where you can get your caviar in because they are a great friend of ours and they do only wine and vermouth and beers and stuff. So you wouldn't see vodka there, but you could see caviar there, and that is the Triangle Wine Company. And they have 4 locations. They are all the way out in Southern Pines. They have a location in Cary, in Morrisville, and in my neck of the woods, Holly Springs. They have all types of wines, great selection of champagne, beer, vermouths, everything you need. They deliver, and they're online at thetrianglewineco.com. And if you use the NCFB promo code, you will receive at least 10% off. Sometimes they feel really good about us. They're really fans of us, and they give you even more discount. I don't know how
Nice.
that part works, but I can guarantee at least 10% off.
Yeah, and by the way, you can't buy this caviar at Triangle Wine Company right now.
Not yet.
But Matt's like basically telling,
I'm gonna
Chris
tell
and Glenn
Chris.
over there, you gotta bring this in. But yeah, because caviar isn't like very accessible for one. I mean, you find it in specialty stores, and that's about it. Because of its rarity, I would imagine too. So
Mislabeled caviar you'll find.
yeah, and
as
then-
well.
And there's so
Yeah.
many variations, right? Like talking about local food. I mean, I was just at Local's Seafood
Yes.
Oyster Bar out there in Transferco yesterday, and I had Batarga tossed French fries, which was great. And Batarga is a mullet roe,
Right.
and that's basically a form of fish eggs or a form of, I guess, you wouldn't call it caviar, but it is a fish egg, and it's a real salty and briny. And they just tossed the fries in it, which was on the other opposite end of the economic spectrum because it was only $1 to add Batarga on top of my fries. Not really what you're talking about here, because then you have fish roe that you'll find on sushi, as Matt alluded to, and then now you have this caviar. So let's I want to go through a little bit of this process because I find it to be fascinating. You have a great video on your website where you had a chef, and she did this great little exercise of, I think she was trying to grab the sturgeon, and that was hilarious in itself because they don't want to be picked up and moved around, I can tell. But please get into the process because this is fascinating to me.
Can I just say before you do that, it's delicious. Like I mean, we have this stigma, I think, of caviar being like super fishy and it's like fish eggs. So
It shouldn't be fishy. It really
it's
shouldn't.
delicious. It's like a high-end pate or something like that.
Well, it really should be on ice, too. It should be very cold, but
Okay.
I'm glad that you still like it.
Yeah, we got to finish it up because it doesn't keep very well out.
Okay, I don't think that'll be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sorry, Max, not to cut you off. Back to your question.
So
Yes.
the process you were going to ask about.
These farms. I mean, it's not like we have. It's a water farm, but you have. Well, tell us what does the facilities look like, and what is this farm situation? How's it set up?
Sure. We have we have 2 locations, so I can describe those more in detail. But I'll describe the Marshallberg Farm, the Smyrna coastal location first. We have 2 buildings there, each about a half acre in size. So pretty big metal buildings, and inside those metal buildings, we have about 40 tanks filled with fish, and about 1 million gallons of water in total, divided by the 2 buildings that we keep in a recirculating aquaculture system, 24/7. So we pump in water from the well into the tank. The fish swim in that water, and then the water is treated. The water drains out of the tank by gravity, goes into a filter, is treated, and then is pumped back into the tank. And that cycle goes on and on and on and on as a recirculating aquaculture system. That's what we call it. So it involves pretty extensive use of electricity to run the pumps and the filters. Also involves oxygen, either that we generate on site or that we have trucked in bulk liquid oxygen. It also involves some labor, of course. We move the fish from tank to tank. We sort them according to age and size, and we also sort them according to gender. Of course, we want females mainly for the caviar, but we also use the males for the meat process. So, in summary, recirculating aquaculture systems enables you to control as much of the environment as you can possibly can. Other styles of aquaculture include split pond systems, conventional pond systems where fish are stocked outside in a pond. Sometimes a net is put over there for predator protection. And the fish are aerated. They get oxygen from aerators that are floating on top of the pond. But you can't control a lot of the environmental conditions out there. You've got sunlight. You've got algae production. You've got predators. I've heard of human beings, coming in there and interfering. I had a friend that was farming in South Korea, and he said that occasionally neighbors would come over there and fish in their fish ponds. And that can be disruptive. So the way that we do it, as I mentioned before, enables us to control as many of the environmental factors as we possibly can. Of course, it's biology. It's living beings. You can't control every single parameter. But in our attempt to do so, we create the cleanest water environment that we possibly can. So I basically run a water treatment facility.
Yeah.
Both the drinking water side and the sewage water side. To give you a sense of scale, the town of Beaufort near us has a smaller public water system than what I operate at a fish farm.
Oh, wow.
So I have 1 million gallons that I recirculate every day.
And you say the recirculation is to let people know that you're not wasting a ton of water.
So we do consume some water.
Okay.
So through the filtration process, through evaporation, we end up replacing about between 5 and 10% of total water volume on a daily basis. So we do have in-ground pumps that are down in not very deep wells, but we're at the coast, so we got really good water supply there. Mm-hmm. In the mountains, they have somewhat more challenge, but also in the mountains they do a recirculating system.
Well, that's the
just
other
like
thing
we
is
do.
You're using ocean water.
We are a freshwater farm.
Okay.
So at the coast, we are not in competition directly or really indirectly with anybody that engages in commercial fishing, going out on the boats.
But when you
all
said you
saltwater
have wells, when you were saying you have wells into the ground and you're near the coast, so you have a good supply of water. So that has nothing to do with.
It's just because we're at level 0 as far as
all water
geography.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the water that goes into aquifers up here from the Appalachians on down through the Piedmont filters all the way underground and collects in this big aquifer underground. Locally, we have the Castle Hayne aquifer, very very prolific aquifer. It's used by the Aurora mines, who they have permits to use like 20 million gallons a day or some ridiculous quantity to do their operation. But it just goes to show you how prolific it really is. There was talk of them sending their wastewater from the Aurora mines back up to Raleigh area, piping it. There was an economic feasibility study done where they were saying, we can ship it up this way. But be all and end all is that we have really good water source there to do the type of farming that we engage in.
Okay. I'm really happy to be broaching this subject because people always have this stigma against farm raised versus wild raised, and not necessarily with caviar and I learned this a long time ago. Well, sure, there's some farmers that aren't, that are just mass producing and they're producing for quantity and not quality. But the benefits of the farm, as you're saying, is it's a controlled environment.
It's
so you're
all
getting
about quality.
Yeah,
it's all about quality, and also we're raising a species that is not. It's not in the wild anymore.
It's no longer indigenous.
It's critically endangered due to overfishing.
Okay.
So we're raising a you could say that we could be helping, to
you're creating, you said to top this up, to begin this, you're creating a sustainable food protein source for everybody.
Right, and we're trying, and we're also going against poaching and everything of these endangered species, which are in the Caspian.
There is a black market.
There is a black
caviar.
market for wild caught, because there's so many countries along the Caspian Sea. It's really hard to regulate.
Yeah, harvesting beluga caviar is actually considered illegal, isn't it?
Oh yeah definitely. It's banned completely.
Right. Yeah, and that's mainly because there's just so few left in the world.
Nothing left, and even the ones that are left, I mean, they would be small, right? Because the large ones would have already been caught.
Yeah, and so the sturgeon that you have they're pretty big, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how in length? What's the average size of
3, 4.
Our harvest length is about 4 feet long.
Yeah,
let's say
that's a
4
big
feet
fish.
long and 30 pounds, 20 pounds, something like that.
Yeah, that's a sturdy fish right there.
It's like this, and you can wrap your arms around it and give it a big old bear
I
hug.
can't pick them up. They can pick them up and handle them, but if I try to do it, it's just like
You should see Sabina wrangling the fish.
She's really good. But
And then, okay, so what is the rate? I mean, obviously, you're talking about female fish because obviously they're eggs. And what is this cycle? What's this process?
Well, around age 4 of these fish, we can then first start ultrasounding them to determine first if they're male or female.
Oh, right. Yeah, you can't.
You cannot
sex these.
look at them and know.
You can't find
you
them
have to look inside. So, and then after that, once the females are separated from the males, then about age 7, start checking them, ultrasounding them for eggs, and then, going from there. So it's about once or twice a year is what it seems like, but it's different for every fish.
Yeah, what's a lifespan of a sturgeon?
In the wild, they've been known to live 100 years.
That's great.
There's no upper limit because they typically get harvested.
And they grow.
At big size.
They just keep growing. So
they'll like for in a fish tank, right?
It's
like
a dinosaur.
Fish will grow
it's a prehistoric
to fill its
animal.
Space, right? Yeah, it's a prehistoric animal.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could Google pictures of.
I'm actually
fish
wearing
and-
one of their the armor on my necklace here. This is a sturgeon scoot. It's called. It's
wow.
like the inside of the back. So they don't have bones, but they have sort of an exoskeleton. So like this is part of their outside armor under their skin.
To get a picture of that. But
but
here's the other thing, though. You want them to procreate, though, right? So you separate them after they procreate?
We're working on a breeding program right now.
Okay. So at this point, they're not.
We are selecting broodstock and then figuring out how to get our own stock to reproduce with those broodstock.
Okay. So because you've been doing this for 2 years, essentially, right? Because I was reading in some of that Marshallberg started in 2017, or is that just one of the facilities?
Well, we started selling. We basically had our first harvests around that time and started selling caviar.
In 2010, we built the first buildings at the coast. Back in 2005, they built some of the first buildings in the mountains at our other facility that we operate. In 2017, we bought that facility.
I see. Okay. And then, when did you start because, okay, this is not only just an altruistic endeavor, you are trying to make a business out of this as well, which, not that there's anything wrong with that at all. So when did you start selling it to businesses and become a wholesaler?
About 2017.
About 2017. Okay. So I guess that's another thing. Okay. How much? So here we are. We're staring at, as Max said, it's about a hockey puck. It's a little smaller than a hockey puck. It's like a tobacco tin.
Yeah, or for the ladies, it's like a makeup case.
Yeah, makeup case. There you go.
Yeah. Like, let's get into the economics of this. You don't have to tell us what your spreadsheets or your bottom line numbers are, but
how much money do you make?
We all know caviar is not easily attainable. But for instance, what is this? What we're eating right now, how much would that be?
That is a 30-gram tin of Superior Ocetra, and that goes for $93.
Wow.
Retail.
We don't have a bill, do we?
No.
Okay.
So an ounce, $93 an ounce.
$93 an
We'll
ounce.
say at that grade.
But we have other grades that are less than that. Now, yeah.
So one fish,
and
one
just,
fish produces
you said we
about.
have to finish this today, right? So it's not like we're being gluttonous.
So one fish, our ballpark numbers, back of the napkin numbers, one fish makes about 1 kilo to 2 kilos of caviar, and each gram of that, goes for what, $1?
A gram, between 95 cents and $1.30 wholesale per gram.
That's
but
wholesale.
Imagine if you were fishing in the 1800s and you caught a big fish and you could get the caviar out of it, and then boom, you just made a big profit. But with what we're doing, it's not the same case. We're putting these fish are in the same. We're keeping them alive for at least 7 to 8 years.
Right. Before you're
so that's a big investment. It's not the same as just catching the fish, cutting it open, and
then
selling.
we hope 50% or half of our stock are females. We hope that's the case, and then out of those, we hope that we're able to find some females that actually have caviar within them. The numbers are about 10% of the females we'll find with caviar. Other ones will miss.
So when you find them with caviar, you still have to wait for them to...
Yeah. Even after we find them with caviar, when they're in the fish tank, we got to take them out of the tank, put them in a separate tank, like a staging tank, and then check them again and hope that the fish has not reabsorbed her eggs back into her body. Which, if that's the case, then we'll simply put her back in the general population, wait till next year and check them all again.
Okay.
So imagine you have a tank full of 1,000 fish. 10% of those fish come out, may have caviar in them in a year. So that's 100 fish. And then after that, you might get 20% of those actually get high-grade caviar.
Right, that you can sell.
So it's actually it's a very tight.
So you got a ton of fish to get a little bit of product,
and then you take that product and you salt it as well, or add some sort of preservative to
just salt.
What type of salt do you use?
It's a fine grain. They call it flour salt because it's just ground really fine where it feels like flour. It's a mine salt. That's what. Well. Yeah, it dissolves much better than a bigger grain. And we use it's a traditional Malisol process, which means it's 4% salt per volume.
Okay, and then you put it in this tin, and that's it, and then you ship them off.
We put them in the tin. Yes, and basically ship it off.
And if I'm a restaurant, do I have to purchase like 10 of them, or
we can basically work with anybody with whatever size they are and whatever they want to do. We're just really about people wanting to use the product and use American and
and North Carolina.
In North Carolina, we're really not trying to put restrictions on amounts that you can buy. We're just trying to get the right kind of people that appreciate that it is American and it is sustainable to use it. That's it, really.
We should give you guys a nice plug right now. So if a restaurant or a chef is listening or a Triangle Wine Company is listening, how do they get your product? Do they just go online?
Well, you can go online, thecaviarfarm.com, and then the phone number's on there. You'd be calling me directly, most likely, and then we could work something out. But you can definitely browse all the products on thecaviarfarm.com. And we also have for North Carolinians, we want them to try our product. So for free shipping, they can enter the code NCSHIP and get free shipping when they order online. And as far as chefs and restaurants go, we encourage you to just try the product, see how you think about it, and if you want to use it at your restaurant, give us a call and we'll work it out.
Let's talk about this market, because this is a very niche, high-end product that you're providing. So your community has got to be a tight one.
Right. So we really are trying to reach out and make sure that right group of people knows that we exist, that you can buy sustainable domestic caviar. You don't have to go to a big distributor and buy imports, because the imported stuff is not, the romantic idea of some Russian boat catching a fish in the Caspian Sea and making this beautiful caviar. It's basically a farm in some country that wouldn't pass our regulations here in this country. So
yes, environmental
labor regulations.
Right. So if you take Matt's good friend Robin Leach, what would Robin Leach say about the domestic caviar?
Well, when he was back then there were still people catching fish in the Caspian Sea. So it was about 40 years ago. It was basically in the 80s that it was still
right.
available. So
but I mean, like quality level of what internationally.
Quality level. I mean, we wouldn't survive if we couldn't compete with what people would think of it being as wild caught. We definitely don't. We definitely want the quality to over deliver.
So would you have international clientele? Like, are people searching for you?
We have had lots of inquiries for other countries that want American.
Right.
At this
point.
This
seems very rare is all my point. Like, there aren't many of you doing this.
No. There's a few farms in this country, not with the type of the species that we raise, not for Osetra, but in California there are several, the white sturgeon, transmontanus,
caviar.
Sterling caviar is a big. They were there before us. They have a different type of caviar, but
I think that it's not so much that there's not the demand for the caviar, but it seems from what you guys are saying, it's the labor intensive and the fact that you don't make any return on your investment for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of factors playing into whether
the system that we're using is definitely different from what other farms are using. We're using something where we have to be feeding it all the time, feeding the system all the time, like feeding it's powered.
Yeah,
we're not depending on outdoors at all.
Right.
So it costs more to do that, and we get it. But because of that, there's a better product at the end, and a sustainability to it.
So when you mentioned earlier that there's some either misinformation or some uncertainty about the difference between wild caught and farm raised fish. Right? No farmer is going to make bad environmental conditions and try to grow something, because their stuff will die. That's the end of it. They will not. If you have dirty water in this industry, all of your fish will die.
Well, without treating the product afterward and basically draining it of all of its original flavor and just making like a basically physical product that doesn't taste like anything.
Right.
I mean, that's what a lot of the seafood that we consume in this country is.
There's other forms of fish farming, like net pen aquaculture. Out in you basically surround fish in a big cage out in the wild.
Yeah, and then you just keep them there.
And you keep them there, and you feed them there, and treat them for sea lice and stuff like that. Yes, there are some campaigns out there to discredit people farming in those styles and say that, the product's dirty, it's infested with lice, it's, you got to put different additive colors into the meat to make it that pink color and all those sort of things. Those farmers are not crazy. They're not going to sabotage themselves by having bad environmental qualities. They're not going to raise them in dirty conditions, or their entire crop will die. I can't emphasize that enough. That the logic.
Yeah,
that's the logic there. If you're trying to say like, their fish are raised in dirty conditions, well, that's going to be a fish farmer that it's not going to be able to sell you a single fish.
Not here anyway. Not competing.
It's similar to trout farming in the mountains. Let's say on the western side of the country or western side of the state.
Right.
Trout farming is actually very clean.
Yes.
For trout raising, like raising trout, and if you really don't find a natural unless you yourself went out fishing and you caught a trout. That's the only way you're going to get like wild trout.
And it might even be cleaner, because if you go out in some of these lakes,
right,
they're banned. You can't fish in them.
Yeah.
The
anymore.
lakes
You can't eat
themselves
the
are
fish.
not. They have not been. They don't have a filter system, and exactly. It's like an old aquarium that no one took care of. Yeah. It's so ridiculous. This is just me being stupid, but I grew up in the Bay Area, and all I listened to was Primus my entire childhood.
One of those guys.
And the old Diamondback Sturgeon, Fisherman Chronicles Part 3, just it's in my head the entire time we're talking. Like
I don't know that one.
The old diamondback
But that's
sturgeon came swimming along, minding his business one day, rooting and sniffing and urging to spawn in the mud flats of the San Pablo Bay. I have heard that song 9 million times.
Crazy.
And it's on Pork Soda. Don't you ever listen to Pork Soda, Matt?
Never even heard of
what
pork soda.
species is that one?
Primus.
I know-
Old
no, no,
diamondback sturgeon.
From what area?
That would be like
Bay
the Bay Area, like the San Francisco
California?
Bay Area.
What is it?
It
White
might be the
sturgeon?
Transmontanus.
Transmontanus, yeah.
White sturgeon or green sturgeon. But
Well, green, could be.
these Russian sturgeon also have the nickname of the diamond sturgeon. In England, they call it the diamond sturgeon.
Diamond sturgeon.
Yeah.
That's right.
By the
That's
way-
cool to relate Primus to fish
would've
farming.
never
We got to
thought.
look that up. Because we always think of like James Bond and Weird Al
Sean
Yankovic
Connery.
or like a sturgeon.
Like
Yeah.
a
Oh, no,
You
that's,
can be cool too. And Primus is
okay,
super cool.
okay.
You're always finding ways to plug in Primus in there.
gotcha.
They just performed on Sunday in Raleigh.
Oh, wow.
And I missed it.
Oh, my
They played
gosh.
with Slayer.
No way.
Yeah, and Phil Anselmo from
Angel of Death.
Pantera. Yeah, they were all there, and I was not.
Hey, speaking of hard rock and booze, by the way, I will give a plug and shout out to the Social House guys as those that the Social House I think was a better pairing.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Interesting.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the one we serve at our tours.
Yeah, it
That's
was
what you
nice.
guys were saying,
The
yeah.
aftertaste was very complimentary to the fish or to the caviar, and then like
But we gotta
don't
do-
sleep on this.
No,
the smoked
that's
sturgeon
delicious.
meat. Although for me, and I'm clearly not a vegan in any way, but it's so weird. Like I can't eat a chicken omelet because that would be so bizarre to me that you're
Oh, right,
using an egg embryo to then also the meat of the mother inside the
Right.
egg. Like it just feels so bizarre to me. So right now eating sturgeon meat with caviar on top of it that's a sturgeon egg just seems so weird.
Well,
to
this
me.
probably came from a male fish.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
true.
Yeah, you're okay. You're okay.
No,
Then.
but me is like always seeking new areas for lean protein or options for lean protein. That's delicious.
Yeah,
So-
Matt's going to carry caviar in his snack pack.
I might.
As he's driving around selling
might.
wine across. You hear that? People that want to buy wine from Matt?
Yeah.
He's packing caviar.
Bring
everywhere
it
he
out
goes.
to sell with the champagne as well. And so we talked about competitors for a second. Oh, wait, there's one more question that I totally forgot. How do you ultrasound these sturgeon?
Aha.
Do you want to get into it? Okay. Ultrasound. You take the fish, try to keep them nice and happy, handle them as gently as possible. You take them out of the tank or try to do in the tank. We're experimenting. You get an ultrasound machine commercially available, just like you would use on pregnant cows or other livestock. You can use it for people as well.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the same device. You just take it and then you rub the probe, the ultrasound probe on the fish in a certain area, and then look on the screen and try to determine.
But the fish isn't like flapping around?
Yes.
Okay. So
But I
somebody
saw that you neutralize the fish a little bit
Sometimes.
with an electro charge in a small water box. I noticed. So I saw in the video that the chef that was grabbing the fish, the whole task was she was trying to take it out of the big farming
That's
bin
right.
into a smaller container so that the fish could be inspected and ultrasound, right? But then there's a light electrical emission that goes in a current that goes into the water and that chills the fish out. Is
Yeah,
that right?
it feels really good. I like it. I don't
We
know.
call it electronarcosis. Nice way of saying it just shocks the fish until they're immobilized.
Tased me, man.
No,
Yeah.
it's not, but it's relaxing. Like when I put my hands in it, I like the way it feels.
It's about 40 volts per meter of fish
Do you ever just lay in there?
to get to your idea.
I
So it's
would if I
40
could.
volts.
The only thing is if you have like a hangnail or something, it does sting. But other than that, it feels like it's kind of like it is very hypnotic. You're just kind of like,
Yeah, I guess you have like those electric pulse things that you use for acupressure and
yeah,
acupuncture,
like
and,
the muscle therapy,
yeah,
like when you have a
relaxes your
pain.
muscles,
It's
so
like that. Yeah,
makes sense.
So the fish just kind of like chills. But we did actually stop using that. Just to not use any sort of and just try to do it with just as quickly as we can and
So when
without
you're looking
any-
on the screen, you're trying to determine the gonad shape. And male gonads look a certain way. It's their sex organ. There's two of them that line kind of the inside of their body on their belly area.
I'm familiar with the gonads. Yeah.
And there's lots of great plumbing and other jokes involved
Sure.
with our industry, of course. So you're looking at their gonadal shape and determining based on previous studies if it's male or female. If you see these little lines, it's a male. If you don't see these little lines, it's probably a female. And
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
definitely
100%.
not.
It's not foolproof. And we're working on other technologies to try to get better at it.
Are you the person that's reading the ultrasounds?
I'm kind of permanently in training on it, but our guru, Sabina, who manages our mountain facility, she has been trained very well on it and can crank out like 400 fish in a day, man.
She has
Wow.
like
She can just...
the eye. She
can look
just
at
looks
these
at
things
it and it's like male, female, unknown, male, female.
But
It's
it
crazy.
takes a lot of
They say everybody has a
effort.
secret talent, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Did
it's
she ever
just-
figure that? Guess what, Sabina? Use sex fish. That's
We
your
call her
thing.
the Sturgeonator.
yeah,
Sturgeon. They
yeah.
don't
So
do human babies that fast.
it's like reading signs and smoke. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
The more you look at it, the more you study it, you can be able to tell, but only after the fish has aged to 4 or 5 years. So you have to treat every fish like it's going to produce a kilo or more of caviar
Wow.
up until that age. So every fish we say is $1,000.
Yeah.
That's the ballpark number. We say every fish is worth $1,000, even if they're this small to this big, or beyond. I've got
Motioning small to big.
Yeah.
motioning small to big, of course, on radio.
Can't see that.
Yeah.
I want to know a little bit more just about, before we get out of here, I want to know more about the culinary side of caviar. Now, obviously, it's a great finisher, a topper. It's high salt content, gives it a very specific edge as to why you would put it on something. But are there other purposes for caviar, and how have you seen it prepared, if any, other than just simply eating it raw like we're doing, or by itself?
I mean, I've seen so many different ways that it's been served, but for this particular type with Osetra, and if it's higher quality, I mean, the preferred way is probably just to keep it really simple and just do like the traditional blini with the creme fraiche, or something very, very simple. Just something to counter the salt a little bit, but you don't want to interfere too much with the flavor.
Don't throw it in a saucepan. is what you're saying.
Right.
That would be, I don't know, but
No,
some
it's actually
crazy
good.
chef out there is probably doing that right now.
When we have caviar that's kind of closer to when the FDA says we can't sell it anymore, then we'll just take it home and make omelets with it and just throw it in all kinds of things, and it's good. Yeah, I mean, it can be used in all different ways. But when it's a new tin, tend to serve that very simply. And
Where do you see the application? I mean, it typically like as a appetizer or beginning of the meal, I guess.
like hors d'oeuvre, I would say.
An hors d'oeuvre, right?
Yeah. And then, of course, it could be a finishing touch on an entree, if you will, just to add, a chef is looking for a really good salt component to just finish there. It's like, we'll just drop a little caviar in there, and it, of course, is sexy to just say, "Oh, I'm eating some caviar."
Right, a little
now.
bit, yeah.
It elevates any event or meal.
Yeah,
That's right. And price wise, we were talking about how much it is. So you're saying for something like this, a gram is $93.
Right, that's the highest grade.
That's
is
a
Not
high
a gram.
that was an ounce.
an ounce.
yeah,
an
An
ounce.
ounce.
A gram, I'm sorry, a
two.
gram was what typically market wise?
Let's say $1 a gram, roughly.
For that would be a wholesale price, yeah.
$1 a gram.
$1 a gram. Okay. Oh, well, that's not bad. Like gold's like $43 a gram.
Right,
well,
right.
but retail, it would be more like double that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how much comparatively would you see it from if we were importing this?
Well,
Your competitors,
right. The interesting thing about that is if you're a distributor in America and you're buying directly off the ship, right? You can buy it for as little as $300 a kilo. But if you're a consumer buying from that distributor, you're going to be spending the same or more that you would be if you bought directly from somebody like us.
Gotcha.
So you're basically getting, I mean, not to be promoting it too much, but you really are getting more bang for your buck buying directly from a producer, because the distributor's going to buy
Take
it
their
really,
markup
they're going to
minimum.
buy a whole bunch of it at a really low price and then up the price to be the same as what
Yeah.
we're selling it for.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense in all economics, right?
Probably,
If you go
yeah.
directly, you're tending to find a better price than that include a middleman in that whole situation.
Right.
But the advantage is by also shopping locally or domestically is that you're accessible, whereas you couldn't really find international
where it came from.
caviar without going through a distributor for the most
Right.
part.
We can trace that caviar tin right there to one particular fish.
One particular fish.
that we harvest on one particular
Yeah.
day by these particular individuals under these particular
Oh,
circumstances.
yeah, that was a question I had, and so you just answered it. So caviar, like one fish would be one serving, correct? Like, would you ever mix?
No, we do
caviar?
not mix. No, never.
Okay. Right. So it's always a single, like a single barrel. A
Right.
single grain.
That's right. It's exactly that. It has that same the fish. Every fish produces a different kind of caviar.
Right. Every one of these fish, we're not trying to homogenize it. Like, we leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Each fish, these fish are not altered in any kind of way to produce like the same color, same size. Each one's a little different, and so we don't mix them together at all.
Okay.
They're all traceable, but every tin is traceable back to one fish.
That's amazing. Do
Is
you
there
have
any-
it like a code on it that tells
Yes.
you which fish?
Yep. I
I don't know if
can.
it's on that one.
Is
But
there anything that we, as just consumers of caviar, don't know or should know? Well, before you get out of here, is there something that like I really wish that people would understand this about caviar, a misconception perhaps about it?
Well, my misconception is I thought that like only really fancy people like to eat it, but from my experience with customers, it's really not. It's really lots of people like to eat caviar.
Yeah.
there are
it's-
caviar
it's-
tourists in this world.
Yeah.
Who just go from farm to farm to place and eat caviar.
I mean, yeah,
and they've
like,
come to
the
our
tour-
farm.
right? Yeah, so we have tours where like you get to see the system and ask questions, and then afterwards have some caviar, have some, do a tasting, and like the people. There's nobody like in very fancy clothes, or there's no James Bonds or anything. I mean, once in a while,
Sure.
but it's very like
Low-key.
very down to earth group. So that was my misconception. But as far as like caviar itself, I always thought it was really before having it, I always thought it was this really fishy thing that would be pretty, like that scene on Big where he's at the New Year's Eve party and he like wipes his
Rubbing
tongue
his tongue.
off.
Rubs his
Yeah.
tongue.
I mean that's what I thought caviar
Right.
was before.
Well, Matt did that earlier the first time. That's why it fell on the ground.
You know what? I got to say, back to the pairing thing. I would love to do like a whole thing and just try a bunch of different
Yeah.
stuff. But strangely enough, and we're talking about how it's like caviar almost for the masses. Do like a highbrow, lowbrow thing, and do like just a nice hazy, juicy IPA with that. Like
Well, I was
that.
gonna say,
I don't know,
and
my mouth-
and like fried chicken or something.
Oh, yeah.
Hush
Beer-
puppies.
Yeah, I think like a crisp cold beer, fried chicken, and caviar sounds perfect.
Yeah.
But also, I would go like a surly, like oyster wines, like surly, like a muscadet or something.
Yeah.
that would probably be pretty awesome too. Any of those like.
I feel like
great
there's a
white
lot.
wines.
Yeah, there's a lot
Versatile.
of options. Yeah, versatile for sure.
Because of that high salt content.
Exactly.
it's gonna be so easy to
Yeah.
collaborate with. You know what also is really great together? Ice cream and alcohol. And
Heard about that recently.
We're gonna try it pretty soon.
You might have heard it on the NCF&B because we are working
Oh, that's-
with Proof Alcohol Ice Cream
Oh,
coming
wow.
out of Columbia, South Carolina. Jennifer Randall, she's been on the show recently. She talked to us about this great, almost scientific way of putting it all together because, as you know, alcohol doesn't freeze typically, or it's very difficult to make it freeze. So to put it in something that is already frozen is also challenging. That process is secret, she said. Didn't tell us, but there is a way to do it. So what we're going to do is send you on your way with a pint of alcohol ice cream. We have
Oh,
a
yeah.
few different flavors to choose from. You've got you have coconut rum, you have bourbon caramel, you have a strawberry moonshine, and they just released an apple pie. Apple
my
pie as well.
God.
It's so delicious.
That sounds so good.
So before you leave, you can go into the proof freezer that we have right outside the studio and select one, take it with you. Matt, what else you
Yeah,
got?
but before that, guys, go look up Marshallberg Farm. Go to the caviarfarm.com. You will eat and drink very merrily.
Thanks for listening to the NCF&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.